Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Self Storage Podcast. I am your host, Scott Meyers. And on today's episode, we have Travis Bailey with Park and Shade. Now, many of you folks have heard or seen Park and Shade and their products out there, but we wanted to bring out Travis on to speak a little bit about not only what he does and give an update, but truly how he got into the business's journey, as well as what he's seeing out there in the marketplace. Travis, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me on the show. I'm happy to be here and happy to discuss what we're seeing and what we do and all the questions you got. Try to answer them as best we can.
All right. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to it. So let's start with that, Travis. Self-storage is such an attractive business for anybody coming out of college or doing anything else that they are just they want to get into this industry. Tell me how you got into the business. How did you start?
Yeah, absolutely. So mine was kind of an interesting, I guess, segue into the industry itself, and it wasn't directly into self storage per se. I Park and Shade is a family-owned company. My dad started it back in 1988, and it started as kind of a small little carport company that based here out of at that time it was in Phoenix, Arizona, and he would just go out and build little shade canopies for cars primarily. Had nothing to do with RV storage, had nothing to do with solar. It was really just building carports for doctors' offices and apartment complexes and you name it, right? And so got started there, very slow growth, definitely didn't explode. And he brought on a business partner in the mid 90s, started growing, the early 2000s, relocated the headquarters a little further south in Arizona to Tucson, Arizona. That's when it started taking off and the company started becoming, a little larger. Around that same time, my dad and his business partner decided that they were going to look at doing RV storage. This was probably around early 2000s, maybe 2002, 2003. And they bought some property here in Southern Arizona, in Tucson in particular, and decided that they were going to self-develop a RV storage facility. And so they figured, hey, we build carports, why not do it? At the time, there wasn't a lot of RV storage, and particularly there wasn't a lot of covered RV storage, particularly here in Southern Arizona. And so they bought the property, they started developing it. It was a good sized property. I don't know the exacts, but I want to say it was anywhere from like 10 to 15 acres. And so they did it, and they did it obviously in phases, brought on investors, the whole nine yards. And then right around 2007, they decided to open up another property in Casa Grande, which is right in between Phoenix and Tucson here in Arizona. Bought that property, started developing that one as well, started building it. And then, sure enough, 2008, 2009, a financial crisis, and people stopped buying RVs. People started walking away from their RVs and boats, abandoning them altogether, extra cars, whatever they were storing at these facilities, it just really hurt the market. And it was just very unfortunate timing. And so they had two active RV storage facilities at the time, and they had several other properties that they either owned or were in the process of trying to buy. Fast forward a handful of years, they, fortunately made it through. They were able to retain those properties. And, my dad and his business partner ended up selling the first one they opened in 2016, I believe. And then they, retained the other one. Around that time, I was in the early 2000s, I was still in school. I worked for the family business. I have four siblings. We all were required to work for it. And it was kind of one of those things where, all my friends would be on summer break having fun, and my dad would pick us up from school and, our last day of school, and he'd have a pair of boots and jeans in the truck and be like, all right, let's head to the site. And we'd be out there working and welding and putting up sheet metal and, getting a really good suntan. But that was kind of the family business. And so I don't want to say I was forced into it, but I was definitely forced into it. And it wasn't really an option. And, Park and Shade, like I said, we didn't just do RV storage. We did a lot of just steel canopies in general. In like 2010, 11, solar started taking off. And so solar carports started becoming a big deal. Solar mixed with RV storage was becoming a big deal. And then, I started when I graduated from college, I started full time at Park and Shade in 2012. And from there, the company's just, fortunately, we've been extremely fortunate and have just grown significantly since then. Um, 20, I purchased the company from my dad and his business partner. And so I'm the sole owner of Park and Shade now. And, to date, I feel like RV storage just keeps growing and keeps becoming a bigger portion of what we do. We still are very active in the solar market, and also very active in just steel canopy markets. doing apartment complexes and doctors' offices and commercial buildings that, just have normal covered parking. But RV is nice because they're big projects, and a lot of times we get to work directly for developers or builders or owners. And so the process seems to go pretty smooth. We just get out there and just go crazy and build these beautiful big money making machines for these developers, and they're happy and they start renting out spots super quick. And so I'd say that to date, we've probably done several million square foot of RV storage here in the Southwest, West Coast. And yeah, we just continue to run with it.
Mhm.
That's kind of my quick intro into how I got into the industry.
No, that's perfect, and we just love to hear that because storage of all sorts and any derivation of that we're seeing is just a great legacy business for family members to step into, and for you to be able to do so and to be able to buy out solely. Congratulations, and I don't know if you had to arm wrestle the other three siblings to do so, but good for you. Yeah, probably good for the, to preserve the relationships. So we've been following. Obviously, I've been in storage for 20 years, and so we look closely at what boat and RV storage is doing as a sub segment of what we are renting out in spaces. And in the past, it has always been, well, we got some land over here, so let's do a little land bank and put some gravel down and put some signs up or some numbers on the ground, and we'll do boat and RV storage until we're able to build another building, because there is always more rent to be had, income to be had under roofs than there was with just an open boat and RV. And I'm in the Midwest, so it's not as critical. Although I would say, you put $1 million RV outside, you probably should put it under a canopy, but it isn't always as critical from a sun standpoint and even a snow standpoint, because they're kind of made for that. But now we're seeing, with the increase, exponentially in cost of these projects, and the fact that people are traveling all over the country with them and parking in different places for long periods of time, yeah, they're going to get beaten up by snow. They're going to get beaten up by the sun. And it's a necessity now. It's no longer a luxury. It's a necessity to have these things covered. And then when we look at the amount of boats and RVs being produced in this country right now, compared to what we can find in terms of development numbers of boat and RV storage facilities, or even in additional self-storage facilities, it seems like the demand way outpaces and outstretches the supply right now. So I'm assuming you're seeing that on your end as well, and the demand on your company.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, I'll preface this by saying there's a lot smarter people that, know a lot more out there in the industry than I do. And so I can't speak to any, specifics on, percentages or what's going on specifically in the industry, other than I see firsthand the demand for people wanting to build these things.
Hmm.
I don't know what the specific returns are, or all the ins and outs of it, but I will say from a contractor standpoint that provides this service for people, or this product for people, the demand is incredible. And it
Hmm.
seems like every year it keeps getting larger and larger, whether people are worried about interest rates or worried about the cost of land or building cost. I mean, it seems like it just constantly keeps going up, and you hear people say, the projects aren't going to pencil anymore. Somehow they keep penciling. Somehow people keep finding a way to do them, and we are, fortunately in a good spot to where we're right there to help people build these things. And so
Hmm.
yeah, we're seeing the market still turning.
So Travis, you don't get into that side too much in terms of like the underwriting. What happens? I would assume that there's an awful lot of folks that just reach out to you sometimes first, and they've got an idea, or they've got a piece of land and an idea that this is what they want to do. Do you do any consulting at all, or do you automatically turn them over to another developer or a consultant to begin to do the numbers and run the math in terms of construction costs versus rental rates and lease up costs and everything else? How much of that do you get involved in, if at all?
No, great question. So in terms of consulting, we don't do a lot of like consulting of like, hey, this is how you need to do it. This is exactly what you need to
Hmm.
build. This is your payback on the project.
Hmm.
These are the good areas, the bad areas.
Hmm.
We don't get into that. We can help from a building perspective. And I think that's
Hmm.
where a lot of people come to us and say, hey, I have this plot of land. What would you recommend is the most cost
Hmm.
effective RV storage solution?
Hmm.
And so that's where I'd say, pretty simple consulting, but also critical to how they're going to build their project is how they're going to configure the parking, right? And
Hmm.
so there's definitely, I feel like every project is very unique. Setback, property lines, easements, building
Hmm.
restrictions, whatever you have, every project's going to be unique. But that said, there's also some general ideas or general guidelines we can give to where it makes it more cost effective.
Hmm.
And, if you just tweak this or if you change this,
Hmm.
I think your canopy is going to be a lot cheaper. And, at the end of the day, steel's expensive and the
Yeah.
carport is not a cheap portion, definitely a big line item in the overall budget. So, I don't want to say we drive how people do stuff, but we can
Hmm.
definitely help them
Hmm.
from a building perspective and giving tips and advice.
Well, we've certainly seen a shift where many times in the past it was you would garner more rent for putting a canopy up versus just an open space, even if you are putting up the canopy. And but then you would begin to there's some diminishing returns when you put up a full enclosure, an enclosed building with four walls and a drive through for an RV. And again, that's some markets and certain projects. But I would find that what we found is that typically a canopy is going to be the best option for us, or even call it a lean-to. We've got three sides but open, and it's not a drive-through. To take that a step further, and I know you just said you don't do a lot of consulting, but do you give some type of a feedback to your folks that are looking for an ROI on solar to be able to offset the electricity, or in some cases to be able to sell it back to the grid? How involved do you get in that side?
Yeah, that's a great question. Back in the it's tough, right? We work in a lot
Mm-hmm.
of different markets. We're based here in the Southwest, but we work, anywhere from Oklahoma to Washington State and everywhere in between. And so we're looking at projects on the outside of those areas as well. And so every area you go into is going to have different rules, different
Sure.
regulations, different utility rates. And so it's hard to just give a blanket
Yeah.
answer of, hey, this is the best way to do it. That said, I'd feel like 10 years ago or so, there was a really good opportunity for developers to go in and build these massive RV storage
Mm-hmm.
facilities and do solar on top. And then they would
Mm-hmm.
just sell the power back to the grid
Yeah.
and, make a fortune doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Very quickly, the utilities were like, hey, we're not doing that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to be losing money.
Mm-hmm.
And so solar, I feel from my perspective, it's become less popular with RV storage. There is, particularly in California, there's still quite a few projects out there that are doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not large scale where they try to cram every square inch of the roof with solar panels.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, California also, I believe, has some green building initiative where
Mm-hmm.
you almost have to have a portion of solar built into your project. I don't know that for a fact, but
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that. And so a lot of these projects we're doing will have canopies, all steel deck canopies, and then they'll have a portion of it that is still dedicated to solar.
Mm-hmm.
That they a lot of times won't use for like lights or charging. It'll go back to the building itself, whether it's an on-site residence or a self-storage building on the property as well. And so, you got to have that demand to be able to offset, something on site. And so that's why they'll try to channel it back to the meter on site or something. And
Mm-hmm.
so in terms of trying to give advice on it, again, I hate to sound like we don't, the only thing we do is just build the carport, or the RV port, but that's kind of what we do. But we team up with a lot of very good contractors that do provide that. And so if someone's interested in solar, fantastic. We'll bring a solar expert to the table and they can bring in their
Mm-hmm.
knowledge and expertise on, what the ROI is and whether it's a smart decision or not to try to implement some solar in the project.
Well, and I imagine grants probably factor into that as well. And of course, any
Exactly.
of these questions that I ask you is, as you just said without saying it, is it depends. For all the reasons.
Yeah.
Sunny days. We're talking about Washington State, very few. I mean, that thing
Yeah.
probably doesn't pencil very well up there versus Tucson. But yeah, let's talk about grants, grant writing, and what's available from the states. So, Travis, I've known in the past that many states, along with the green initiatives that you mentioned, they do offer grants as well for certain areas, for certain buildings. If you're going to build solar, then you can get a certain amount of money off, and a rebate, if you will, by the state for putting these energy saving measures in place, or even from the utility companies themselves, because their grid may be overloaded. And I know it varies in different places, but have you seen any shifts or changes in that landscape recently that you're at least hearing from your consultants, or from some of your clients?
Yeah. Good question again. I think that, again, I think it all channels back to like California. California's
Hmm.
kind of the front runner for a lot of these things. And in California in particular, some of the developers we work with have been implementing solar on every one of their projects.
Hmm.
I don't know exactly what grants or what incentives are pushing them to try to incorporate that solar into their project, but there's definitely something out there that is either requiring them or they're
Hmm.
getting some sort of benefit from doing so on it, not just a uh, you know green incentive. Or I don't know. I don't know the specifics of it, but
Hmm.
I will say that majority of the RV storage projects that we're doing in California have some sort of solar
Hmm.
built into them, if not a significant amount of solar.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's also very specific to California. Come over here to Arizona, very little solar we're doing on
Hmm.
top of canopies. Go out to Texas, very little solar.
Hmm.
Colorado, Nevada, same thing. It's just a
Hmm.
big push for solar being on these projects.
Well, so let's just talk about the market in general, Travis. Depending upon where you're looking, who you're talking to, from the publications and the blogs to the individuals that are out developing, the market's hot or the market's not. It's horrible. We're developing right now. We're converting industrial buildings, and we're not waiting around for interest rates to get better. We're building at today's interest rates. If they pencil out, and we know it's going to get better, and there's still a demand for storage. But I know many of the developers are seeing a slowdown because there are some folks that are still sitting on the sidelines. What do you see compared to, say before we call it this downturn, in comparison to your activity level? Is it just steady as she goes? Did you see a pullback or a small pullback, or has it just been, all guns blazing since, 2020 on till now?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. We work with like a wide range of clients, and I feel like all of them kind of have different motives
Hmm.
for what they're doing. I mean, they obviously want to make money, but at the same time, like some of them are institutional money, some of them are family money, some of them, they're just a guy owns a land and he's got nothing to do with it, wants to turn it over, and so
Hmm.
I feel like we get a wide range of clientele, and so it keeps us busy regardless of what the overall atmosphere is at that time. And
Hmm.
so, for example, when interest rates are super low, we're getting a lot of these big, institutional money developers that come in and they're just buying up these massive properties and doing,
Hmm.
several 100,000 square foot facilities that, just hundreds and hundreds of RV,
Hmm.
storage under them. But then when interest rates are, going up and that's not as attractive, we're seeing a lot of mom and pop shops that are coming out and they have this property that's been in their family forever,
Hmm.
or hey, they made a lot of money in something and they're interested in experimenting in RV storage.
Yeah.
And so, fortunately, we've seen a demand, steady demand over the last 5, 6, 7 years,
Hmm.
regardless of what is going on, in the economy. We're still seeing that demand.
Hmm.
And I would say that it seems like it's getting greater and greater. I saw you at the ISS self storage
Hmm.
facility, or excuse me, the trade show earlier this year, and at a booth right across from you there. And I mean, I was blown away by how many people were interested in
Hmm.
self storage. Because I've heard, like you mentioned, I've heard people be like, money's too expensive. We can't build it right
Hmm.
now. Building costs are too expensive. Land's too
Hmm.
expensive. We're not going to do it. We're going to mothball everything until the stuff's cheaper. I don't know if it's getting cheaper. And so I think people are starting to realize that this is kind of the new norm is, prices aren't going to come back down to what they were pre-COVID. And if you don't jump on, then you're going to miss the train, right? And
Hmm.
people are jumping on. And, we saw massive demand at the self-storage show from all over the country, from all types of, clients. So
So, Travis, do you go all over the country? Will you go all over the country?
good question. So we've been asked if we will, and I we've always been about cautious growth.
Hmm.
We've grown almost, I feel like it's consistently like a good 20%, if not more, every year for the
Hmm.
last like 10, 15 years. And so we've kind of exploded, and every year I keep thinking like, oh, we're not going to take on more. And every year we keep expanding. And so right now, I mean, we have certain clients that we do projects with, that we have a comfort level of working with them, where we will entertain projects outside of like the Southwest, West Coast. But if someone were to call me and say, hey, I got a project up in Vermont and I want to cover, 15,000 square foot of RV storage, I'd probably recommend that they try to reach out to a local steel guy. It's not something that, right now we have the bandwidth to do,
Hmm.
or also from a cost perspective, we just wouldn't be the most cost effective to travel across the
Hmm.
country at this time. So not to dance around your question, but
Yeah,
it depends. Again, to go
of
back to it
course.
depends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, how many states are you really active in, would you say? What's your footprint right now?
Yeah. So we're in about I want to say 8 states actively.
Hmm.
Our biggest markets are definitely California, Texas, and Arizona.
Hmm.
Beyond that, we're doing quite a bit of work up in Colorado.
Hmm.
We work in New Mexico. We work in Nevada. We work in Utah. And just this year, we're starting to do our first projects up in Washington State.
Hmm.
But we've done work in Oklahoma, looking at stuff in Louisiana. So
Hmm.
we'll slowly branch out. And again, it just goes back to that depends on who we're working with
Yeah.
and what the project looks like. If it's a really small little project, a couple spaces or a handful of spaces that they want to cover, it just financially doesn't make sense for us or the
Yeah.
developer to go out there.
Yeah.
But if it's a big project where we can send out a crew and set up shop and it's going to take
Hmm.
several months,
Hmm.
then it's definitely something we'd entertain.
Yeah. Have you seen the states that you're very active in? Has that been recent? Has that been steady growth, or are you seeing a shift? During COVID, we saw a shift, back to the sunshine states or the smile states, as we called, where people were sent back home to work, and that meant that they could work anywhere and move anywhere. And we saw a migration down to your part of the country, southeast, southwest. Are you seeing any particular market or state that's seeing exponential growth, or that's outpacing the others? And if so, what do you attribute that to?
Yeah, this I'd have to credit this very intelligent developers we work with because again we just go and build these things and they
Hmm.
have models looking at residential homes being built and apartment complexes being built
Hmm.
and all these different indicators showing what's going on.
Hmm.
That said, Phoenix is an unbelievable market
Hmm.
and it just keeps growing and booming and there's a lot of money being pumped into that economy. And so
Hmm.
Arizona in general has been great. Phoenix specifically we've had a tremendous amount of growth there, and a lot of RV storage we do is in Phoenix. Along with that, Texas, obviously, a lot of California companies are trying to shift out towards Texas and
Hmm.
take advantage of their, tax situation
Hmm.
and cheaper operation costs out there. And so
Hmm.
we've seen, not just in RV storage specifically, but in general building and solar and everything, Dallas, Austin,
Hmm.
Houston, San Antonio, all those big cities out there in Texas are experiencing tremendous growth as well. And then California is just kind of always busy, even with,
Yeah.
a lot of industries trying to get out of there, there still is just a ton of opportunity. And so,
Hmm.
the Southwest has been, I guess, South and Southwest has been very busy and good to us for sure.
Hmm. Hmm. Right, Travis. So, get your crystal ball out. Where do you see the industry heading right now? Call it covered parking, boats and RV parking, and then what are your specific plans for Park and Shade to take advantage of the growth that you're seeing out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the industry is on an upward trend for sure. I think that, RV storage is just becoming more and more popular. I think more people are trying to get into it, not
Hmm.
just the same, big guys that own a bunch of different facilities. There's a lot of people that are wanting to explore it and try to own their own facilities. And so, it's very positive looking. It's exciting. And in terms of, what is Park and Shade doing to be part of that, we're kind of just fortunately we're in a position where we're kind of along for the ride
Hmm.
and we're taking advantage of being in the right place at the right time.
Hmm.
We're a reputable steel carport installer. There's a lot of companies out there that do steel, but companies that only do steel carports, there's not
Hmm.
a ton of them, around the country. And so we're in a good spot. We have great relationships. We got a great name in the industry. And so as we make more relationships with every type of client out there, big institutional money to smaller developers, it's a good position to be in to where they kind of take us along for the ride and help us spread out and tackle more markets, go into new areas and build, all kinds of projects, big, small, you name it, everything in
Hmm.
between. So that's, I'd say the goal for Park and Shade is to keep growing with the industry.
Yeah.
I don't know that I can predict exactly where it's going to go.
Hmm.
Years ago, we only worked in Arizona and California. So that's it.
Hmm.
But now, we're working in 8 different states or something like that and
Hmm.
looking at other opportunities as well. So to answer your question, we're kind of just rolling with it. We're in the
Hmm.
right place at the right time and ramping up to take on, as much as we possibly can.
Hmm.
Me personally as a goal is yeah, I mean, help Park and Shade grow, help try to capture more, develop a lot of these relationships and hopefully get in on my own RV storage and try
Hmm.
to own some properties myself as a personal goal, which is something I'm looking at, but I've just been so busy building other people's facilities that it's hard to go and build my own. I got to focus on my day job. So
Hmm.
that's kind of where
Just congratulations since 2020. Fantastic growth. They got the right guy at the helm, and congratulations to all your success. Now, how do people get in touch with you if they want to find out a little bit more about what you do and if it's right for them and their plot of land?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate that. We're not big on marketing. I'd say that, we're kind of old school when it comes to that. So we're not
Hmm.
big and flashy and push ourselves out there a lot. We have just a general website, parkandshade.com. And if people go on there, they can reach out to our contact.
Hmm.
I work a lot directly with people looking to build these facilities. And so if they reach out, or my direct email, just Travis at parkandshade.com. And
Hmm.
I'm happy to work with basically anybody and everybody looking to get into this. And,
Hmm.
we're also very straightforward and we'll help out if it's something that doesn't fit us or something that, we're not able to help with, I have no problem trying to help them find someone who can help them with their projects.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, Travis, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it. And, typically when we end a podcast, I will ask a question of our guests, such as what is the best book you've ever read, or what are you reading now, or the best piece of advice you've ever been given? I want to customize this one a little bit. And I want to ask, what is the best piece of advice your dad gave you when he handed the keys over to you to run the business?
Man, that is a caught me on the spot with that one, Scott. He taught me, I'd say that he taught me a lot of things. Hard work's a big one,
Hmm.
but also I think indirectly, not just like telling me, but I think through his actions, just always doing what was right.
Mm,
Maybe it wasn't, the best financial decision for Park and Shade, and maybe we lost a client, or maybe we, didn't win a job, but at the end of the day, he could, lay his head on his pillow knowing he did what was right. And I
yeah.
think that was probably one of the best things that my dad ever taught me was just, do what's right, and everything else
Hmm.
will work out. And
Yeah.
again, it, you know, may not win everything out there, but at least you'll have a lot of great relationships, and you'll work with the people you want to work with. And so that's probably probably the best thing he taught me.
Yeah. Well, integrity isn't advice, because it's not learned. It's something that is just that you embody. But if you live by that, and sometimes people are, even if they do have integrity, they're tempted to do something they shouldn't do in business. But those that are in it for the long haul, this is a marathon, not a sprint. Those who remain above reproach and operate from a place of integrity are the ones that typically are winning in business. Yeah, hold on to that advice, my friend, and it'll serve you well.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, my pleasure, Travis. Thanks once again for your time, folks. Storage Nation, you've been listening to Travis Bailey of Park and Shade, and we will include all of your information, Travis, in the show notes for everyone to be able to follow up with you should they have a need, and when it is the time for them to also get into the boat and RV storage business, as well as covering those boat and RV storage units. So with that, Travis, thanks for your time once again. And for the rest of you, we'll catch you all on the next one. Take care.